Similar to Luxor, Teotihuacan was used by the Sirians to house key technology. Luxor held the antenna to activate the spaceship, and Teotihuacan safeguards the time travel teleporter. We also have historic proof, since Teotihuacan translates to Place of the Gods, so we know where this level's name came from and that the Sirians were here. This time, we'll have multiple levels dedicated to traversing the city to reach our goal, the Sun Pyramid. Nitrixa mentions how it houses the teleporter and that Teotihuacan used to be impenetrable and protected by highly trained Mayan soldiers. So Nitrixa, where are those highly trained Mayan soldiers and Teotihuacan's chastity belt? I think Mental had something to say about that. Maybe the crash really did turn her Dumbo switch on. Yet, there's a slight problem.
Wait for me, Montezuma. Here I come.
This could have been passed off as a joke or a quirky line, but I think Sam might be proving his nickname right now. A Nitrixa entry shortly after about the city shows that we may have time traveled into the future already. As you may know, Montezuma was the last Aztec emperor before it collapsed from the Spanish conquest during the 16th century, and the capital of the Aztec Empire was Tenochtitlan, not Teotihuacan as Nitrixa states in the entry. They are geographically close, but the location and time periods don't match up. But let's take it at face value and play along because there is further evidence that Sam's timeline does not match up. That being the secret lost Spanish canon showing how the discovery of the New World and its conquest have already occurred. It may also explain why we see a destroyed building as a first for the series. There is more devastation found in the Serpent Yards in the plaza before the Moon Pyramid. To be fair, Nitrixa never mentioned what year it was when we arrived in the Sierra de Chiapas. The only clue she gave was how Palenque is 400 years away from the location of the Holy Grail. That grail became a literary concept sometime between 1180 and 1240 AD. Let's assume 1200 AD for a round number and for when the Holy Grail came into existence. Why not use 33 AD when the Last Supper occurred, to which the grail that Jesus used became the Holy Grail? First, the Holy Grail is not considered canon. Second, there is a Syrian group called the Archal Magi that were around during the Middle Ages, so a year such as 1200 AD could be possible. Using Nitrixa's 400 years away statement places us in 800 AD during the Mayan Late Classic era, before the Aztecs were a thing, and the very tail end of Teotihuacan's collapse. Or 1600 AD, right in the middle of the Spanish conquest and after the death of Montezuma. I can see why an exact year was never mentioned because this is all one big mishmash of history where one time period fits some parts but not the whole picture. For this to work, we'll need to believe that the Mayans were the only Mesoamerican civilization, Teotihuacan and Montezuma were Mayan, Teotihuacan avoided collapse, and that the Mayans maintained their empire past their classic period collapse until the Spanish conquest. After all of those assumptions, then 1600 AD could make sense with what we see in the game, such as Nitrixa's entries, Sam's line, and the secret Spanish canon. How Sam ended up at this year from ancient Egypt, don't even ask. What we should be asking is, what does the Oracle Nitrixa have to say when we arrive in the third and final episode? 1138 AD? Wow, I was not expecting this to actually line up for once. We're not that far off, as that's a few decades before the Grail was first mentioned in literature, which would be logical if the Grail is real. So that places this episode in either 738 AD or 1538 AD. Given what I've already said, 1538 AD makes the most sense with all the assumptions. There's also the Book of Wisdom mentioned in the Medieval Europe episode, which is specifically for locating the Holy Grail. A date isn't mentioned for when the book was written, still it's very likely that this was the first literary mention of the Grail that managed to spread as a rumor. That then brings us to another very important question. Was Montezuma a Syrian? He's said to be one of the most powerful rulers of the City of the Gods, Teotihuacan. Reading further, he used two masks when acting as a judge. The seriously scary mask to let the accused know that they're screwed, and the hilariously happy mask that could cause uncontrollable laughter and tears of relief. It sounds to me that Montezuma toyed with the person's emotions like he's a fan of the Joker. What makes it even more interesting is how these masks do have real life effects, as if they're magically imbued. Picking up the scary mask causes an ambush. It's nothing that serious where death is near guaranteed. The ambush is more about inducing panic, like the function of the mask. Because you get rained on by frogs, then clear and wearables start busting through the walls like the Kool-Aid Man in a room that's not that big. Those enemies are not ideal to fight in a small room like this, so naturally it'll be chaotic unless you can grab a hold of the situation. There's also a tiny face inside the mouth of the mask if you look closely. I wonder if that's an alien reference. That would be scary having one of those things squirming around in there. Grabbing the happy mask, on the other hand, makes laughter occur with no ambush. You do get jump scared by the possibility of dying to a cucurbido though. In case you're curious, the seriously scary mask's historic inspiration either comes from the Olmec rain spirit or the were-jaguar. There is a debate on whether they are one and the same, so it could be either one or both. A were-jaguar is a Down syndrome baby born from a woman getting freaky with a big black jaguar, showing the meaning behind why they're called pussycats. But since I did find a one-to-one match with a website showing it as the rain spirit, we're not taking the furry route. Unfortunately, the website doesn't mention where the picture originates from. The hilariously happy mask might be based off of one of the stone faces found on the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. If you remove the middle circles, take off the very top block, and scrunch things up a bit, it's a close match. Those stone faces on the temple represent Xiaoquatl, otherwise known as the Aztec war serpent god. You can see these masks lining the walls in some spots in the levels, along with an unidentified third one. The only match that I found was a Tumblr account that uses it for a profile picture. I reached out to her asking what the picture is from and what it is, but I've yet to receive a response, likely because she doesn't use the account anymore. So the third mask in the pattern remains a mystery to me. A mentally deranged, powerful ruler with enchanted artifacts. Sounds like a Sirian to me. I mean, who else would have special chambers for dwarves, hunchbacks, and albinos? Hitler? Well, now that I think about it, was he a Syrian too? Before I mysteriously disappear, let's check out the level. No trap involving the secret health. Maybe I'm paranoid, but I expected a trap given the enclosed space. Looks like the rehab is still going well, and it looks like we have another new enemy called the Zorg Commander. They're a bit of a rarity to see, and even more so during the Babylon episode, when the Zorgs don't show up much at all except for a handful of times. The reason for that is because the Babylon levels were originally supposed to be for the first encounter, but we'll get to that later when it's more relevant. The Zorg mercenaries are composed of foot soldiers and commanders. They hail from Beelmez 4, even though the entry states that they come from an unknown part of the universe. Regardless, it's a made-up thing. They lost all of their skin from some vacation sunbathing after a long period of successfully conquering planets. Mental took notice of them and recruited them into his army. Those with any skin remaining became the commanders. Besides having skin, a different weapon, and wearing underwear, the commanders have 20 more health points than the foot soldiers, which is 2 extra shots from the revolvers. For either variant, they are stronger than the beheaded, but you can still treat them with the same threat level since they're still fodder enemies. Their attacks trail behind the player to their last position, similar to the beheaded, yet the commander is a special case. Their attacks are programmed to predict the player's movement, and those attacks are a fanning burst of laser beams. The prediction doesn't matter that much when afar because of how the lasers fan out, but being up close can be deadly since there's hardly any time at all to dodge. We don't see the commanders that often, and even less in close quarters. It's not something to worry about, just don't try to get close to them. The Zorg's missing skin likely explains why they get stun-locked whenever they catch a flame. I like to imagine that it reminds them of their time baking in the sun during their vacation, so they're trying to savor the moment. No other enemy gets stunned like them when on fire, which we can assume is because they still have their skin and no fond memories of suntanning. Even the kamikazes keep running when on fire. The commanders can survive being set aflame because of their extra 20 points of health. For an in-game reason, we can say that it's because they still have some of their skin. Considering that Mental struck a bargain with the Reptiloids to be in his army, it's not that strange that he would hire mercenaries to fill up his ranks. We don't know for sure if he actually paid the Zorgs or forcefully made them join, since Nitrixa doesn't clarify that. If anything, it gives us a clue that Mental is stretched thin or is losing too many soldiers if he's needing to supplement the beheaded. He's obviously currently fighting Sam, and given Serious Sam 2's opening cutscene, he's still fighting the Sirians. Sam was not planned for, therefore it makes sense that he would need to bring in more troops to cover two fronts, especially considering the one-man army that is Sam Stone. Zorgs have the reputation of successfully conquering planets to the point of getting bored. It's only natural that Mental would recruit them. I've made this point before back in the Temple of Hatshepsut, but I'll reiterate that Mental will eventually backstab them to eradicate them like every other intelligent life form, which also includes everyone else within his armies. That may also explain his partial reliance on biolab-created life forms, because he would have control over their deaths once all other intelligent life have been dealt with. A totally not suspicious lone pill. The major biomechanoids are undergoing treatment, plus the health pack from earlier was safe. Let me just quick save as always. I'm sure that it'll be fine. The other surprises so far have been tamed. Secret bloodbath has been activated. These goddamn biofentanoids shooting up the neighborhood just for some pills. Back in my day, you had to suck dick behind the alleyway dumpster for some crack. The times we live in nowadays. Oh, come on, there wasn't even a pill lying around or a secret. The kamikazes too? I didn't know the flying circus was in town. They do have a unique mitosis mechanic where killing one spawns two right where it died. That would have been neat to see it used more. Crow Team's cheekiness is starting to ramp up to what it was in the first encounter, and not just in their surprises. We also have some devious placements of the arachnoids in the first courtyard. We won't see it reach full throttle yet until Babylon, but we'll still get hints of it every now and then. Overall, things still stay relatively tame compared to what we've dealt with previously in both the surprise attacks and regular fights. One part of that is because not many of the Crow Team specialties outright kill or harm you instantly in the second encounter, unlike in the first encounter. The other part of that is due to how we're receiving more supplies, so Sam's more stocked up on health, armor, and weapons. For example, serious armor and serious health are given out much more generously, whether as a secret or not. We already maxed out on the amount of serious bombs that we can carry too, 1 in the last level and 2 here from a regular pickup and a secret. You'd think that it would be more of a rarity given how it can wipe the screen clean of enemies. We'll almost have all of our weapons too, except for the laser gun, by the halfway mark of this level. There won't be much time at all throughout the campaign without some serious firepower, even with the 2 arsenal resets. Maybe humanity back in Sam's original timeline are having an easier time fighting Mental and can afford to send Sam more stuff, including the new weaponry. If Mental is moving his army across space-time, similar to Sam traveling back to the past, then this relief could be because of Mental diverting part of his army to fight Sam, which could be why they teleport into existence. It's hard to tell because we don't have a clear picture on how all of this time travel stuff works. Plus, if you include Serious Sam 3 BFE's ending, then the original backstory gets thrown into the garbage and we no longer have an explanation for guns being scattered throughout the past. Needless to say, Nitrixa needs to start being all-knowing again and give us some answers, but with how unserious she's being, it doesn't seem to be likely. What is serious is how ominous this alley looks. Add the serious health, blue armor, and ammo pack on top, and it looks like we should expect another clear alley. I like how it starts off with a small wave of kamikazes with one of them holding the cannon. If you shoot without care, you'll have to wait to obtain the cannon since the kamikaze will drop it where it died. That is, if you didn't find the Sacred Yard of Big Head secret earlier, which also yields the cannon. or blew up the secret pillar before that in the building that held the seriously scary mask. Third time's the charm, I guess. We'll see the mechanic continue with more kamikazes carrying cannonballs and one with an ammo pack throughout this fight. It's a nice way to make the player be more careful and selective on who they shoot to make the fight more engaging. Yet, it's a tragedy that this fight doesn't use the mechanic well. Like with what Sam says,
Woohoo! Let's go bowling.
this is like going bowling with your cousin. When it switches from wearables to the classic clear and kamikaze combo, then it becomes a game of hot potato. Either way, it provides a good example of the issue that I brought up earlier in the Valley of the Jaguar about how big the arenas are now. This could be an ample amount of enemies, but the corridor is too long, allowing you to spam explosives to keep them at bay. There really isn't any pressure, and funny enough, you can view it like how pressure works in real life. The enemies are particles and the arena is the container that they're within. Increase the size of the container or decrease the amount of particles, then there's less pressure. Later on in the level provides another example of this within a more enclosed space with the clear trickling in. There's not enough of them at one time, and the flamethrower makes short work of them anyway. Just circle strafe and whip your crosshair around, and that's basically it for the fight. Of course, if you decrease the temperature, then there's less pressure too, and that can be seen as the enemy composition. We only face the rushing type of enemies here, such as clear, kamikazes, and wereballs, so there's no ranged threat to worry about besides the clear's ball and chain, to which you can simply move to the side to dodge. With how well the rocket's minigun or grenade launcher works against this composition, you don't really need the cannon, so you don't have to carefully aim your shots to let the kamikazes carrying the cannonballs get closer. Just use any of the other weapons. A ranged, high-health enemy such as major biomechanoids or the demon could help incentivize using the cannon more, or even having the wearables in the same wave as the clear and kamikazes could work. A high-health enemy would encourage using the high damage output of the cannon to get rid of them quickly. The wearables move faster and provide cover for the clear and kamikazes from how big they are, encouraging the use of the cannon's piercing ability before they can close the distance. The cannon and cannonballs could be swapped out for any other weapon for the kamikazes to carry ammo for, such as the minigun. An all-purpose weapon like that is valuable and may work better in this scenario with a variety of enemies to rapidly change who you're focusing on. It also does a better job at selectively targeting enemies to let the ones carrying ammo get close to resupply. Either way, it might be a good idea to deplete the player's ammo pools beforehand to make the ammo carried by kamikazes more of a necessity to have, or else the player could use whatever they have on hand and bypass this entire setup.
Come on, I have enough lead for all of you.
Hey Sam, we were just talking about that. Yeah, this has been pretty easy, surplus of supplies, no pressure and all that. Say Sam, have any of your future selves told you if we ever make it to fighting mental? I heard that... Oh, I stand corrected. You know, that kamikaze with a backpack was pretty cool. He was friendly and just wanted to run and scream like a kid. But this wearable cannon does not play around. Knowing that it can kill you with overcharged health and armor in one shot puts fear into oneself. With that being said, this next corridor has a bit more going on. Its focus is on biomechanoids, and with the wall separating the two corridors, there's an incentive to use it as cover. The majors deal a lot of damage, so putting yourself out in the open when it's not necessary doesn't seem enticing. That limited visibility from the wall being used for cover then allows the wearable special forces to get into firing range. They shoot their cannons fast, with them being instantly fully charged. They also shoot multiple balls in a quick succession as if they're packing a load in there. You could just retreat further into the first corridor to bypass all of this, but that's no fun. It's also not necessary to use the wall for cover if you're confident enough, making it a matter of who has the bigger balls of lead, you or the bowls. So whatever happened to wearables with cannons and kamikazes carrying supplies? That's the funny part. They don't show up again. We do have an instance of frogs carrying power-ups in the Citadel and kamikazes carrying cannons in the Land of the Damned. There's also more harpies carrying kamikazes in the next level and in the Grand Cathedral if you want to count those too. Otherwise, that's it, which is a shame. It feels like the gimmicks where we get a sample of something new but never see its fullest extent of what it could blossom into. I would have liked to see these ideas used more in the campaign and observe how they would work in different scenarios. They change who to prioritize during a fight, which is a great way to spice things up in Serious Sam because it connects seamlessly with part of the gameplay's foundation of getting rid of the biggest threat first. The next area is like a smaller suburbs or suburbs part 2 in Metropolis with getting jump scared by kamikazes and the love for spamming arachnoids. It may be bite-sized, but it certainly has some of the bite of the Metropolis version. For example, the secret Spanish cannon mentioned earlier where it kills you if you don't get out of the way fast enough. Or it just kills you either way. Another cheeky thing is how this arachnoid doesn't spawn in until your back is turned to it along with another to the side when your attention is pulled towards the major biomechanoids on the opposite end. One of the trademarks of the first encounter that we haven't seen that often yet is the clear around the corner ready to pounce and take out a third of your health. Well, about that, the Q-Curbidos took their job. They're more fair since they don't immediately damage you upon discovery, and you can still hear their chainsaw popping when they're waiting in ambush, similar to the clear snarl. They can be a bit slow on the job too. We'll still see some clear around the corner, but they are nowhere near as common as they were in the first encounter. The Q-Curbidos are another genetically engineered life form. This one reveals that Mental has time-traveling agents who seem to collect samples of a species' culture. Why does he need these samples, and who are these time-traveling agents? It looks like the samples help with the genetic engineering process and possibly help spur Mental's creativity since even he falters at the sight of the Q-Curbido. The time-traveling agents, on the other hand, have no answer. If they're supposed to operate in secret, then they naturally wouldn't have much to talk about, and because Natrixa doesn't elaborate. There is the first Shadowverse trailer that has a multiverse intel mechanic which could tie into this idea. Since it's being called the next installment of Serious Sam, I guess this would be canonical, at least for now. I have my skepticism about that since on the Steam page, Mental is being called Uber Mental instead of his usual notorious Mental name. So I hope that it isn't canon so I don't have to untangle why Mental became German, but I digress. Currently, the time-traveling agents only means that there are spies among us. It could be you. It could be me. It could even be... Gameplay-wise, they are like a worse version of the werewolves. They do the same amount of damage and charge based on their momentum. While werewolves can realign themselves to go for another charge in a reasonable amount of time, Q-Curbidos can be slow at turning after missing their attack by constantly trying to adjust their direction. Q-Curbidos do not have the knockback effect of the werewolves either. They also have less health than the werewolves. Both of them may take 2 rockets to kill, however, 1 grenade is enough to kill a Q-Curbido while a werewolf still needs 2. Or just use the almighty sniper rifle that would kill either of them in 1 shot. It's a good reminder that a direct grenade does 25 more damage than a rocket. The other 2 aliens where this matters are the big lava golems who take 6 rockets or 5 grenades to kill, and the reptiloid demons who take 4 rockets or 3 grenades. Q-Curbidos also do the same amount of damage as the Clear and have more health than them. They don't have anything to compete against the Clear's projectile or their mobility, so we have another rushing enemy that doesn't add anything to the gameplay besides variety. That's fine, but it would be nice to have something special, like maybe have them deal a low amount of damage but have a constant attack rate when within range to reflect the fact that they have a chainsaw. In case you're wondering, their chainsaw sound does have directionality to it, so you can tell where they're coming from, just like the kamikazes. It's a bit harder than the kamikazes to tell how far away they are, though. Natrixa mentions the underground tunnels that will lead us to the Moon Pyramid, one of the major pyramids of Teotihuacan. We'll see that in the next level. One unique pyramid lies within this level, however. Nothing mentions it besides seeing its name in the editor. The Pyramid of Hichachar. It's a made-up pyramid and isn't a real word either. Not even translating it from Croatian works. This means we'll have to do some investigative work to find its source. There are 3 known pyramids in Teotihuacan: the Moon Pyramid, the Sun Pyramid, and the Feathered Serpent Pyramid. The Moon and Sun Pyramids are shown in the next 2 levels, so this one must be the Feathered Serpent Pyramid. Case closed. No, seriously, this one was actually easy to find out. If we take a look at the real-life Feathered Serpent Pyramid, we can see these stone heads of a square, big eyeballed visage, discussed back with the hilariously happy mask and the Feathered Serpent god. That visage is sometimes incorrectly referred to as Talak, and the more accurate interpretation is Xioccoatl, or the Aztec war serpent god. The other stone head is technically a portrayal of Quetzalcoatl, or the Aztec version of the Feathered Serpent god, but since Serious Sam is taking the Mayan perspective, this is Kukulkan, the Mayan version of that god. They are distinct deities, however, for the sake of simplicity and since they're both manifestations of the Feathered Serpent god belief within Mesoamerican cultures, we're considering this to be Kukulkan to fit Serious Sam's story. We can see those same features on the pyramid within the game, just not one-to-one in terms of their placement. At the very top, the Feathered Serpent is shown. Right below are the war serpents. One thing that I have to mention are the beaver-looking heads that adorn the base of the pyramid in the game. I'm not sure where those originate from. We'll talk about the significance of this pyramid and the other 2 when we get to see them later. Another cool detail is how the real-life Teotihuacan has both man-made tunnels and naturally occurring lava tubes underneath where the pyramids are. The lava that we'll see soon and the tunnels leading to the Pyramid of the Sun later on have some historical merit. Navigating through the underground passage yields one of the more interesting traps in the game. Continuing with the wind theme, you have to fight against it to avoid falling down into the spikes or running into them. You can skip the first half and instead fight the tiny Cucurbitos through a secret passage. The wind is a bit tricky to account for since overcorrecting your momentum will make it impossible to recover from. We've seen before that the traps aren't anything mechanically special besides the ones tied to a gimmick, which I consider as a part of the gimmick rather than as a standalone thing. The standard traps are the typical crushers, blow darts, and some that shoot out lava balls. There's also the special mention of the rocket launcher heads at the very start of Serpent Yards for picking up the armor shard, and another a little bit after as a part of the laser beam tripwire. Those rocket ones are a special case and we'll discuss them later. The Babylon episode will switch it up to include platforming challenges unlike what we saw with the bounce pads in the Valley of the Jaguar. Wait, is Natrixa self-aware? I'm getting a headache, now's not the time for your shenanigans. Babylon also has a unique stone boulder pinball launcher that makes use of the physics engine, which is nice to see. The medieval episode goes back to using crushers, but at least they're stylized to fit the stereotypical torture device theme of that period. I'll take that over a regular block of stone jutting out of the ceiling. It makes it visually interesting even if the trap is simple. We'll also see the blow darts make a return. The blowy part uses a lion model, which fits their use in heraldry at the time. It somewhat looks like the cowardly lion from The Wizard of Oz. We'll also see this lion blowing balls out of their mouths in the Grand Cathedral. The Mayan episode City of the Gods blow dart heads follow suit with depictions of an evil clown with blood-filled eyes, and the same feathered serpent heads found at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent discussed earlier. The ones spewing lava in the Valley of the Jaguar are the red-eyed clown again, and in the pit as the forked-tongued serpent head briefly mentioned back in the previous level. One thing that throws a wrench into this is how those serpent dart trap models are also in the pit as regular statue heads. Those ones there, within the editor, are called eagle heads. I have no idea why they are named as such, yet they do point towards another feathered serpent god. That one, who is called Cucumax, originated in a subset of the Mayans that lived in modern-day western Guatemala and was sometimes envisaged as an eagle. Maybe they got mixed up in development, or any and all feathered serpents are now forms of Kukulkan in the Serious Sam universe, which is not that far off from how it is historically if you don't take into account all of the nuances. The clown, the lion, and the forked-tongued serpent imagery don't have any real-life source from what I could find. Despite that, I think we can safely assume that the forked tongue serpent is modeled after Kukulkan, with its editor name being Dragonhead to make it mythological. With that in mind, and the feathered serpent also being Kukulkan in this context as previously clarified, these traps seem to be set up for him. Wind also composes a key part of a bunch of the gimmicks, such as the one with the spiked walls and the wind currents in the Valley of the Jaguar, the bouncy walls in the pit, and, of course, the spike pits here in the underground passage. We'll see Kukulkan as the guardian of the teleporter later, so it would make sense that the Mayans would create these traps and gimmicks to support him. We also have confirmation from Netrixa that they were built by the Mayan people. There is even one final trap of sliding down a ramp with spikes in the way of going into the boss fight arena. They really don't want anyone to be here. It's impossible to say whether these traps were ordered by the Sirians or Kukulkan, or how much those two collaborated on the teleporter. I'm not sure why he would freely agree to protect the teleporter. I lean more towards the Sirians being the masterminds of the traps and how the teleporter is only in benefit of the Sirians and Kukulkan being a neutral party. With how they ordered around the Egyptians to build a bunch of monuments for themselves, it's not far-fetched that they manipulated the Mayans to build protections for one of their most prominent gods. We'll reveal a theory when it's more appropriate to discuss and hopefully explain all of this. Some of the traps were fine and add a bit of personality to the game. Others feel like speed bumps that don't serve any purpose besides breaking up the gameplay so that critics have less of a reason to say that the game is repetitive. The gimmicks feel the same way, but I can understand not spending that much time on both of these concepts to make all of them good given the short development period, which makes it odd that they bothered to implement speedrunning barriers when it affects very few players. We run into the first instance of them here in the lava cave, which are called safety spawners in the editor. This one spawns in major biomechanoids if you try to cross the lava river without eliminating the enemies first. There aren't that many of these safety checkpoints. There's another in the next level if you don't fight the first arena, and the final one is in the Tower of Babel within its right side corridor if you try running past the Cucurbitos. With only 3 of these checkpoints in the entire campaign, what's the point? Serious Sam already has built-in speedrunning countermeasures, needing to kill all or a certain amount of enemies for the door to open, or if it's not an arena, having a bunch of projectiles and rushing enemies on your ass. It's even more strange with how one of the secrets in the Citadel encourages you to rush through to reach it in time before the door closes, or else you'll have to blow it up with a bunch of rockets. Calling it a mega secret in an all caps message with an exclamation mark, can't forget about that, and then a minute later telling that it was disabled only furthers that encouragement. Speedrunning was only a niche thing at the time, with competen, or competition, however you want to pronounce it, being solely focused on Doom. Speed Demos Archive only hosted Quake speedruns until 2003, and YouTube was not around until 2005. So the mainstream appeal wasn't quite there yet. Still, Serious Sam encourages getting through a level as quickly as possible with the time bonus that adds onto your high score. On top of that, Serious Sam had its own speedrunning community shortly after launch under the name Serious Sprint. Why they would put in spawns specifically to discourage speedrunning is just odd when not that many players are going to do it anyway, and speedrunners will find ways around it like rocket jumping or some technique that no normal player would ever do on purpose. I can't think of or find an explanation for these spawns, and I believe the only chance for an answer is if someone from Crow Team explains it. That would be the perfect segue into showing the answer from a Crow Team developer, however, I never received a response to my email. It's unlikely that anyone remembers the purpose behind those spawns anyway. Once we're through the lava cave, we reach... oh, that's a foreboding amount of ammo. The bounce house seems fun at first. Everyone is jumping around and it's very chaotic with kids screaming their heads off as they usually do when having fun. But someone throws in a box of pointy bones, bombs, and toads into it, and now no one's having fun anymore. Then you have to subject yourself to pills to make it all stop until reality kicks back in again. Trying to stay on one of the stable platforms is too risky with everything flying your way. Hiding in a corner doesn't work unless you want to get dribbled on like a basketball. Needless to say, This is some dad's midlife crisis at their kid's birthday party put into a game arena. It is just too chaotic where it feels like you have to rely more on random chance than skill. You can temporarily turn off the bouncy floor by grabbing 2 of the pills and keep repeating that until you get through this fight. It's not a good life lesson, but it works. Thankfully, the health packs, pills, and ammo pack respawn. However, the serious health and armor don't. The serious damage power-ups also respawn, but they take so long that they don't come back until after the fight is over unless you're really taking your time here. You get 4 of them, so it's not a big deal. The flamethrower seems like it would help in this fight, just spray and pray, but its range is too short and awkward to use. You won't have much control over the flame given how you're in constant motion. You'll want to kill the kamikazes before they get close as they will be the ones dealing the most damage, so you'd want to be able to focus on specific targets. I found the minigun or Tommy gun to be the most helpful with their fire rate and accuracy in this scenario. It's possible to kite the enemies around, however it's going to become messy with them coming in from all sides. You don't want to camp a corner or else you'll get overwhelmed. So, you'll have to make do with kiting them as best as you can while being ready to get rid of that kamikaze that is coming from another direction, or take the pills and get rid of this headache sooner rather than later. This idea could work in a more controlled scenario. For example, the enemies come from a bouncing platform while the player stays on stable ground. The main fight takes place on that stable ground while the player still has the option to eliminate high priority targets bouncing in before they become a bigger threat. It would be similar to how the major biomechanoids and kamikazes flew in earlier in this level, just in an arena format. That way, the actual fighting isn't at the mercy of random chance. A big component of that is because the arena is small. Kamikazes in clear are able to attack within moments. Later on, we see a similar room in the pit where we have bouncy walls instead of a floor. It still features the clearing kamikazes, but not the frogs who didn't really contribute much anyway besides making it more chaotic with quantity. This one works a lot better because there's more distance between the player and the enemies running in, and the player only has one front to deal with. The erratic movement isn't that much of a problem now as the pressure shifts to how well the player can aim instead of trying to gain control over a chaotic situation. It's possible to have more control over your movement so that you're not getting tossed around too. That helps make it feel that a mistake or death is the player's fault, while the bouncy room is too much of a blender to truly know if you got screwed over by the game or not. You do not want to make a player feel powerless over a situation by making the outcome feel like it relies on random chance in a game primarily based on skill. Otherwise, it becomes frustrating and tedious. Serpent Yards brings us back out into the open air, which is good because I think we're starting to see things. There was this plant that turned into a kamikaze. Nitrixa didn't say anything about it, so I'm not sure if it really happened or not. Now that I think about it, we haven't had a break ever since we stepped into the time lock. All of humanity is counting on us, so we must push forward in spite of that. We come face to face with the meaning behind this level's name. You may have noticed it previously, but here it's put front and center. Its real-life counterpart, like many others, is found at the British Museum. It was likely used as a pectoral or a necklace that goes down to the chest. The exact purpose behind this piece of jewelry is unknown, but we at least know some general meanings that could be tied to it. Serpents, to the Aztecs where this originates from, are believed to be able to bridge the layers of the cosmos, the underworld, earth, and the sky, due to some species being able to freely move between water and land. That sounds like the roles the Sirians took back in Egypt, with Osiris, Geb, who ironically is also associated with snakes, and Ra. Turquoise serpents, in particular, are linked to celestial events, with the example given being 2 of them accompanying the sun as it travels across the sky each day. Once again, this mirrors Ra's role of conducting the sun's journey across the sky, even to the point where the night is also seen as the underworld, which we'll see in a quote very soon. A theory that the museum gives is how this pectoral may be a skyband that shows the celestial realm. A skyband, in the Aztec context, is basically a symbolic view of the sky. A better example to demonstrate this is the Sunstone or the Aztec Calendar Stone. On its side are a bunch of dots, which represent stars. Below the double line is a symbol of Venus alternating with sacrificial knives. Altogether, it means, quote, the evening sun penetrating the underworld, night, Miklan, the womb from which it will be born, triumphant every morning, unquote. What's more pertinent to us is the quote below that, which says, the morning star, the brightest star, was not represented simply by a white disk or by a round eye like the other stars, but rather by hanging stemmed eyes and flint knives that expressed the rays it emitted. In this context, the morning star refers to Venus, but in our context, it could be Sirius. Those exaggerated rays may very well be the battle between the Sirians and Mental with all of the explosions and laser beams going on. All of this is to say that this double-headed serpent is a Syrian concept and further shows their presence here matching what they did in Egypt. All of this sounds like Ancient Aliens conspiracies because it literally is. It's supposed to be taken ironically like this game's name. With that being said, Sirians are real and they're... Ah, shit, they're onto me!
Stop right there, criminal scum! I fought mud crabs more fearsome than you.
Okay, phew. We're in the clear for now. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, the double-headed serpent, or what I like to call, being uncircumcised. Natrixa's entry about it says that it represents the goddess of the moon, Ixchel. She's correct that Ixchel is the Mayan goddess of the moon, but the double-headed serpent doesn't have any connection to her. The closest thing is her depiction in the Dresden Codex, where she has a snake hat. We'll talk about the Dresden Codex later on with the other real-life codices. Nevertheless, she could have been a relevant goddess to have here. We'll see the moon pyramid of Teotihuacan within this level. You can see the crescent moon emblem over the snake statue in the distance, which is a neat detail. Natrixa says that she used to guard the sun pyramid though, which doesn't have any historical basis. In the game, I think this is mentioned because the snake statue stands overhead and on the gate towards the sun pyramid's interior. Otherwise, there are no mentions of her in that level. We'll need her mask found at the base of the moon pyramid to progress. It gets a bit more confusing with how the mask activates a laser beam to destroy an Olmec head who was guarding a temple containing a secret armor. She doesn't do anything if we blow up the moon pyramid either. If anything, we did the Highlanders a favor by freeing them from their entombment. As an aside, 2 Highlanders at once sounds like a lot to handle, but they are easier in the second encounter because their projectiles now travel straight instead of homing on to the player. To be fair, Natrixa said that she isn't the protector of it, yet it is odd that she would let it happen given how she's the moon goddess. Ixchel isn't much of a protector, is she? So far she has blown up more than she has saved. This whole thing gets even more weird with how the mask holder to activate the laser beam is called Kotlikwe mask key in the editor. Kotlikwe honestly might be more fitting for how Natrixa describes Ixchel. She wears 2 snakes giving themselves a kiss, and gave birth to Huitzilopochtli, who is the Aztec god of the sun. However, she isn't the moon goddess, but does have the title of being the mother of the moon and stars. She also isn't a protector, and in fact, had to be protected from her daughter, Bel's her cheeks, when she gave birth to Huitzilopochtli. It doesn't quite match the descriptions and events within the game, but she is a better fit than Ixchel. It is possible that the 2 of them got mixed up, or there was a change made during development, leading to the mask holder's name becoming an oversight. I'm not sure what she did to get relegated to being a key holder. While Natrixa is busy thinking about movies, let's go back to the arena near the start. She mentioned that Clear were coming to protect the Serpent statue. Their job is to get in Sam's way, but why word it as guarding all of a sudden? I think it's because they've taken a defensive position here, knowing that Sam would arrive from the lava cave. Coming from that cave would also explain why there's lava flying around, since there's nothing else that could cause it. Shortly after the fight, we can see a trap that Natrixa suspects was made by Mental's minions. We haven't seen them lay traps like this before, so it's nice to see that they're trying something new to stop Sam. It's like a tripwire where crossing the beam causes the masks to shoot out rockets. No other masks shoot out rockets besides the ones found in this level, making them uniquely mental. You can hop over the beam and render the whole thing useless, which feels very fitting to do against the villains in a Saturday morning cartoon. Just don't let a werebull get behind you, or else the joke is going to turn onto you. The fight isn't that interesting to talk about besides seeing one of the only instances of harpies carrying kamikazes. Also, we won't see Mental laying traps again until the Citadel where Nitrixa states they set up the boxing glove. After that, we'll have to wait until Serious Sam 2 for some very delicious and not suspicious bananas. With that in mind, they also set up the other rocket launcher mask near the start that fires when getting close to the armor shard or ammo pack. No other traps activate on a trigger like this since the Mayan ones were designed to continuously impede and discourage progress rather than outright kill someone through deception. Hence why we can safely assume that these rocket launcher traps are Mental's doing. However, the teleporting sparkles around the East Shell mask and the Olmec Head fireball launcher were both set up by the Mayans. They're always active and need to be overcome to unlock the door forward. The Clear are also affected by the teleports, so they weren't made an exception. Not like Mental would care if this was his doing. You know what else is a Mental trap? This head statue that behaved like a marsh hopper, and after that, I saw this kamikaze that had a head. It had no mouth, but it could scream, so I think Ted just didn't try hard enough. Isn't that right, Nitrixa? Maybe that lava cave was burning up something special, but she doesn't seem to notice any of this stuff. She's too busy thinking about her career and show business. Between you and me, she doesn't have a shot. She doesn't even have a voice. How crazy would you have to be to hear a voice from an AI that doesn't speak? While we're on that topic, let's talk about some alien conspiracies. In Teotihuacan, there are 3 major pyramids: the moon, the sun, and the feathered serpent. There's honestly not much of anything special to them in a historical sense for our purposes. The main thing is how there's likely some sort of astronomical significance to them, not because of their names, because we don't actually know their original names, but because of how they're aligned, which is an ongoing theory. Instead, we'll need to look at another type of theory. I can think of no better way to start this off than with this very credible and deeply researched statement. Quote, "The ancient Egyptian civilization firmly believed that it was from Sirius and Orion that beings came to Earth in the form of humans, referring to Osiris and Isis, and according to mythology, they literally instigated the human race. This is perhaps one of the main reasons why the builders of the pyramids decided to mimic the constellation of Orion on the surface of the planet." End quote. This profound and perfected proclamation gives undeniable evidence that Sirians are real. But keen listeners may have picked up on something. We've heard things that we've already discussed before: the star Sirius and the Egyptian Syrian deities Osiris and Isis. However, we never mentioned the constellation Orion besides in the context of the Flame Nebula back when talking about Karnak's night sky. What does Orion have to do with all of this? If we look at the 3 primary pyramids of Giza from above, which includes the Great Pyramid, and if we look at the alignment of the 3 stars of Orion's belt, the picture speaks for itself. The placement of the pyramids closely align with those stars. In academia, this is called the Orion correlation. For those who are ancient believers, we know that this is not a correlation, but instead the work of Sirians. The original backstory mentions Orion with a brief story of how the constellation came to be, since Sirius is within Canis Major, one of Orion's dogs. The ancient Egyptians believed the belt to be the resting place of Osiris. We already know how prominent the Syrian Osiris is, but this does bring up the possibility that they inhabited not only Sirius, but also the stars that make up Orion's belt. Maybe that was Osiris's home star system. We do know that they had a colony on Proxima Centauri, among others that haven't been named. It may also explain why they are some of the brightest stars, because there is a war going on between them and Mental. The Mayans believed the belts to be part of the hearthstones of creation, which symbolized the creation of the world. More on that soon. You can also see the Flame Nebula again in Teotihuacan's night sky, just like back in Karnak. It even includes Onatak, one of the stars that make up Orion's belt. Judging from the star map, it looks like the other bright star might be V1197 Orionis. It just doesn't match the color. In case you're curious, Sirius is too far southwest to be it. The next question is logically, what does this have to do with the pyramids of Teotihuacan? For that, we have another excellent statement that writes itself. Quote, "The layout of the pyramids of Teotihuacan are placed in such a way that they represent our solar system, but also Orion's belt. According to ancient mythology, it is a point of creation. History tells us that in 3114 BC, the gods came from the heavens to earth in a convention, and this convention occurred in Teotihuacan." End quote. There you have it. The truth is laid bare before you. Indisputable evidence that the Sirians influenced the architecture of both the Egyptians and the Mesoamericans. The main pyramid of both of these complexes house a method of transportation. In Egypt, it was the landing pad for their spaceship. Here in Teotihuacan, it holds the time travel teleporter. With the Nitrixa message telling of other Sirian spaceships, the other pyramids could be landing pads and parking structures for smaller UFOs like personal vehicles. There's an engraving of a Sirian within one of these personal spaceships. It's possibly the scout spaceship that Nitrixa mentioned that crashed based on how janky it looks and how the engraving is on the lid of a sarcophagus. That sarcophagus is in Palenque too, located within the Sierra de Chiapas, which is where it crashed. The pyramids also served another function. In Giza, they were a royal mortuary complex to contain the dead of the elite. Likely only for the Sirians, but it is possible that human remains made their way in when the Sirians lost political control and died out. We can say the same thing for the ones in Teotihuacan. My guess is that it's for easy transportation of their dead. Like I've said before when talking about the mummies right before the obelisk room in Luxor, tomb raiding may have been a concern and they wanted to protect and preserve their dead as they went extinct, maybe in hopes that future technology could resurrect them. The latter half of the quote mentioning 3114 BC when the gods came to Earth in Teotihuacan may have some merit in the context of Sirius Sam. 3114 BC is simply when the Mayan calendar starts. Looking at the original backstory, it is confirmed that the Sirians made contact with more than just the ancient Egyptians. It also states that their expedition team came to Earth some 5,000 years ago. That claim was made in 2063 AD, so subtracting 5,000 yields an estimate of 2937 BC. Not quite 3114 BC, but it is within a reasonable margin of error with only a difference of 177 years. So those hearthstones of creation could symbolize the Sirians coming from outer space and bringing the Mayans out of their archaic period. Still, we need more evidence to prove it. And in case you were wondering, it could not have been the aliens since they disappeared several 100,000 years ago. Thankfully, a self-titled multidimensional archaeologist, the perfect profession for analyzing Sirius Sam, has cracked the code to time travel recently. And it was because of codes found on the Mayan calendar. He shared his findings in the academic journal known as YouTube. However, one of Mental's time-traveling agents doesn't want you to find out the truth, and terminated the channel. I can't learn what else he may have had to say, but maybe we aren't ready for such mind-shattering knowledge. Yet, the article talking about his findings does mention how his discovery led to him creating a divine time travel map. He adds on that two types of portals exist, passage of time portals and personal vision portals. The time travel map could be how the teleporters are linked up to each civilization, such as what we see in the loading screen. The passage of time portals would obviously be the teleporters themselves, but what about the personal vision portals? For those who have seen my painkiller analysis, this isn't a new topic. In it, I've mentioned St. Patrick's Purgatory, which gives anyone who walks through the gateway visions of heaven and hell. This sorcery could be how the Sirians deceived humans into treating them like gods. The backstory says how the Sirians only started to research and practice magic, so they would need technological assistance to amplify their magic or perform the illusion of magic. What those personal vision portals may be, I do not know. It can at least explain why artwork of the Sirians appears not human when portrayed in their deity form or any other strange feats that they can do in the mythologies. One final part about the Orion correlation is how there are more pyramids that align with Orion's belt, as you can see the ones in Xi'an, China. They also mention some Hopi mesas that also align with it, which are located in the Black Mesa rock formation in modern-day Arizona. No, not the Half-Life Black Mesa, which is located in New Mexico. That alien invasion isn't Mental's doing. Yet, this brings up a good point. Where are the ancient China and Native American episodes, Crow Team? There's one other thing that connects the ancient Egyptians and the Mayans, unrelated to everything that we've been seeing throughout this episode. We can see it prominently featured in the next level, the pit. Diving into the pit, we won't see it immediately, so let's skim through the start and see what Netrixa has to say about this place. She theorizes that this is Xibalba, or the Kingdom of Death, which is thought to be a myth until now, and she's actually quite close to the historic truth. Xibalba is the name of the underworld for the Mayans, while another subset of them called it Metanol. If only they knew how to spell. The entrance is said to be in Tlaoticpac as a still pool of water, or even the Milky Way, so having the small pool here as the entrance is a good adaptation of the myth. There's not much else that's relevant, and the rest is Netrixa being scared. I think this is just a way to explain why a later section is an expansive pitch black due to us being in the underworld. In case you're curious, the crystal pillars at the start don't have any historical significance from what I could tell. Maybe it's supposed to be obsidian, which was used extensively in the area. Either way, it's primarily for decoration. A little further, and we encounter more of the same traps that we've seen before. Even Netrixa admits that it's true. But we can finally see what I was trying to talk about earlier. Who the hell is clapping? We've been seeing this mural a lot, but let's get a better view of what I'm talking about. Wait, hold on, Sam's massive chin got stuck on the slide. There we go. The walls are covered in the mural, and we can clearly see that teal color. This one is from Bonampak, an ancient Mayan city, depicting a celebration of the ruler's son being declared heir. That part isn't important. Its color is. Blue is a historically hard and rare pigment to create. The first way to extract blue was from lapis lazuli, and as you can imagine, it was limited in use. To solve the supply issue, Egyptian blue was created as a synthetic alternative to properly display their gods. Egyptian blue, despite its name, may not have been invented in Egypt and may have came from the Sirians. No matter where it originated from, they both used it extensively. The Chinese also had their own slightly different version of it called Han Blue that was chemically related, including a purple variant. To quote the article, the fact that the Egyptians, Assyrians, and Chinese did develop a blue pigment of their own indicates the advanced nature of their craft skills, even though they had no knowledge of the chemistry. This lack of knowledge about its production leads to a number of slightly different accounts of how it was made. Unquote. Oh, we know how it was made. Who would have the knowledge of chemistry during this time? If you answered aliens, you're wrong. They're called Sirians. They have a name. Aliens are what we call Mental's minions, those gray bastards. Wait, is that considered racist? Shit, cut to the next. However, we do not see Egyptian blue used prominently in the first encounter. It's mainly for filling in stripes or accessories, and very rarely as a main color for clothing or the background of an artwork. We see blue much more frequently in both the Mayan and Babylon episodes. Why is that the case, especially when the pigment is named after the Egyptians? While the ancient Egyptians did use a variety of colors in their artwork, the Mayans managed to invent one known as Mayan blue that could withstand alkalines, acids, and humidity. Thus, the Mayan murals can look more vibrant compared to the Egyptian reliefs. Although, other colors will degrade due to the heat and humidity, as the Mayan blue's properties seem to be unique to itself. It's also a matter of different art styles and what was available to use. as well as how well the artwork was preserved. That's why Crow Team extensively made digital copies of a few select places such as the Tomb of Nefertari and Bonampak. I'm sure if there were more well-preserved tombs and temples, then we would have more variety in both artwork and color in the game. We're limited to what survives the test of time. As for the Sirians and Babylonians, their pigments survived because they used Egyptian blue as a glaze embedded into the bricks and not as paint or the usual surface level glaze. So now we have another connection of Syrian origin across the globe with the connotation that the color has magical properties in addition to being used to paint the gods. Blue pigments, pyramids, a focus on astronomy, and seemingly advanced technology for the time. To be fair, it's like playing a game of Civilization. Everyone is starting off in their own area and developing the same technologies, all without being in contact or knowing of each other's existence. Unlike Civilization, technological progress in real life can go backwards, get lost to time, or stagnate. It's not a linear advancement. But if we take this in Serious Sam terms and bring in the conspiracies, it's all because of the Sirians. Pyramids are relatively easy structures to make big and tall to house spaceships. Astronomy was studied because it would help guide humans towards being curious to eventually explore other planets to discover more Sirian technology when they're ready. Blue pigments were likely invented for the Sirians to feed their ego by leaving their mark and elevating their status with rare materials as they became unhinged. Still, the Mayans are a strange case. I couldn't find a good source on the meaning or purpose behind the use of Mayan blue, like how the Egyptians used it to color the Sirians. All of the other points still stand, it's just that there's a noticeable lack of Sirians being portrayed in Mayan artwork when compared to Egypt. The same goes for the other two episodes, Babylon and Europe, in their artwork. For example, the skulls lining the walls throughout the levels are taken from the Temple of the Skull in Palenque, to which the skull's intended representation is unknown. A mystery one is this bust where all I get are eBay, Etsy, and gift shop listings and a Reddit post. It is possible that Crow Team based this one off of a souvenir piece, or that these are based on a historic thing that's being obscured on the internet by their made-in-China counterparts. The latter does have some merit, as there is an artifact of the old deity of fire, otherwise known as Hueoteotl or as Xiotecotli, that does look similar. Some other murals from Bonampak are also shown within the game, such as these ones being beamed into your eyes. They're all depictions of events during the lives of the Mayan people, such as celebrations, royalty, warfare, and sacrifices. We're not going to get much insight into the Syrians that were here from these paintings. Still, their absence does hint towards a theory coming soon. We do have some other artwork of gods, like this image of a gold pectoral artifact representing Mictlantecutli from Monte Alban's Tomb 7, and this picture of Talak that comes from the Mayan Codex Laud. The Mayan codices were, quote, hieroglyphic texts and painted with images of ceremonies and everyday activities being performed by Maya deities, end quote. The oracle further adds on with, quote, codices were made by specially trained scribes who had knowledge of the different calendar cycles. This was gained from years of observing the night sky and recording the positions of the stars and planets. Evidence of this practice has been found at sites such as Xultun in Guatemala, where notations painted on the walls of a structure formed the basis for the types of astronomical computations recorded in codices. Because of the knowledge they contained, codices were considered sacred and could only be handled and interpreted by certain people who had the necessary skills and position in society, end quote. Sounds pretty similar, doesn't it? If you don't recall, back in Luxor, I theorized that the weighing of the heart afterlife ritual was a way to find loyal scribes to translate and transcribe the Syrian time capsule underneath the Abu Simbel temple. These codices may be something similar as a backup in case the ones in Egypt were lost or destroyed. Their knowledge also ties back to the Aztec and Mayan calendars discussed earlier. It is almost certain that these scribes were members of the Archal Magi. Nothing about the Mayan codices is in the backstory or directly mentioned in the game itself. but it does make for an interesting historical tie to the Sirians, especially since they have a focus on astronomy, with one of them also focusing on Mayan blue, along with the codices being considered sacred and restrictive. To be fair, the Mayans considered astronomical bodies like planets and stars to be deities, hence the first quote saying the everyday activities being performed by Mayan deities, like explaining why the sun goes across the sky every day. It also includes things of what they're the god of, like farming. For our purposes and how the Egyptian gods were given star representations, we can assume these deities to be Sirians. Since the Taluk painting found on the walls within the game does come from the Mayan Codex Lald, we do have a connection to these codices, or at least Lald, being a thing in Sirius Sam. Similar to how scenes from the Papyrus of Hunefer, one of the Books of the Dead, can be found painted on the walls of the tombs in Egypt, as well as the Moon Mountains Papyrus being a section taken straight from the Papyrus of Ani. Plus, with all the timeline shenanigans and each new Sirius Sam game rewriting the lore, we can basically make our own lore and no one can tell us that it's not canon. I'm declaring the Mayan codices to be the work of Sirians. That also includes the historically accurate and sourced from a museum, Buff Mickey and Tank depictions in the Mayan codices. As you can tell, a bunch of the artwork comes from the Bonampak murals and the Feathered Serpent pyramid. Once again, it's because they're one of the only sources to survive long enough for Crow Team to digitally copy from. We still have a sizable number of gods portrayed within this episode, but we don't see them as often as we did back in Egypt. A lot of the space taken is of the Mayan people and their culture without the image of a god being plastered everywhere. Even the final arena that Kukulkan guards only shows the Mayans, and for anyone that noticed, I have not been able to identify the portrait within that arena and elsewhere, so if that happens to be a god, then this is false. The exception for a god being shown everywhere is, of course, Kukulkan, as we've seen him quite a lot. For the history nerds, yes, this artwork is technically the Vision Serpent. We're treating it as Kukulkan with the same reasoning as the different Feathered Serpent deities, and because this particular lintel is dated from the Mayan period. The only other one that comes close to Kukulkan's frequency is Ixchel, because of how Netrixa associated her with the double-headed serpent statues. We'll see the lack of gods in the other episodes too. Babylon has a few possible Sirians, and Europe has none at all. A likely theory is that the Sirians were only present in ancient Egypt, Mesoamerica, and Babylon. The loyal scribes and priests to the Sirians, the Archal Magi, constructed the teleporters found outside of Teotihuacan. Medieval Europe makes sense because the Sirians died out by then, but Babylon was around during ancient Egypt's time. The Sirians may have kept their focus within Egypt and only established a small foothold within Babylon primarily as a failsafe. Nothing stops some loyal Theban priests and a couple of Sirians from walking over there to do so. They could use their hoverboards to ride some gnarly waves and show the Babylonians how cool they are. As for the Mayans, we've shown evidence that they were here, but why were they here? My guess is that they went into hiding after the revolt led by Memphis rulers. Eventually they escaped and found their way to Mesoamerica. Then they started the Mayan Golden Age and the rise of Teotihuacan. That also helps tell why there aren't as many gods shown here as there were in Egypt, because they were dying out. If you want to throw in the big heads or Sirians theory too, that's why we see them hiding in the Temple of Hatshepsut, or because Mental's minions arrived. It's hard to tell. I'll leave it to you on what to believe. The next gimmick room that we run into is the unstable ground where Netrixa makes fun of the Mayans and mentions bananas.
I love bananas!
There isn't any difference in how you play or how the enemies act. It demonstrates the meaning of what a bad gimmick is. At most, there will be jank with the camera jittering when you're near the edges like it's moving on its own. I don't think this idea of a tilting platform works well since nothing really changes from how a fight normally goes. It would be funnier if the tilting platform had a slippery property to it, causing everyone to get thrown around. I'm not confident that would result in a fun fight though, since it would severely limit your ability to dodge. I appreciate that Crow Team attempted to get creative with all of these different gimmicks, but I feel the need to call them gimmicks instead of mechanics because of how short-lived they are. It would be better in terms of gameplay for Crow Team to cut down on the number of them to focus on a few and really dig deep to show how far you can go with them. A lot of these feel like samplers, a taste of what the engine can accomplish, but never more than that. Granted, these do give Serious Sam its charm of being a cartoonish, over-the-top first-person shooter. You'll never see bouncy rooms, tilting floors, or physics-defying gravity in any other shooter, let alone all in one game. Even the newer Serious Sam games don't dabble in these things anymore. So, is there a reason as to why? My guess is that it either falls into the engine not being able to handle it, too complicated to implement with how complex and intensive game engines have become, the developers thought they were not fun, or there's no willingness to get creative and take that financial risk to deliver something unique rather than playing it safe. The original design document highlights the gravity feature of their engine and how Crow Team had ideas to make the most of it. It's anyone's guess as to why they never implemented more things that utilized the multi-directional gravity. They may have been saving them for the serious episode that never came where Sam arrives at the star system to fight Mental in the Alpha. It's a shame too, because there are arenas that use multi-gravity well to make for a unique fight, such as Newton's Nightmare later on in this level and the ramp in the Palenque demo. Exiting the room allows us to see why Netrixa called this place Shabalba, even more so as we're greeted by a demon as soon as we enter. And it doesn't stop there in the underworld, since we get to meet an old friend. Well, relatives of an old friend. Hi Blondie, when is the next Duke Nukem game going to come out? I didn't think you meant the last game to be forever as literal, right? Ah, my finger slipped.
Oh my god, you killed Blondie.
Well, he was a whispering demon, so it was probably Randy Pitchford trying to tempt me with one of his magic tricks. I would have liked to meet Blondie's sister, Brownie, anyway. Time to go see Pinky's brothers.
Hey, you look familiar. I think I killed your brother in the last game.
Understandably, Brain is not happy to see us, but it's nothing that a couple of shots can't solve.
Oh my god, I killed all Pinky's brothers.
You did good, Sam. They were going to try to take over the world. At least we're in the underworld right now, so their journey will be short. It's also one of the only times that we see verticality like this. Usually the arenas are flat, but this one has a nice sense of scale to it, likely because we need to go quite a ways upwards to get out of the underworld. Newton's Nightmare and the gravity-defying room right after probably serve as a way to keep those in Shibaba from leaving. This could have been the best instance of Crow Team utilizing the multi-directional gravity of their engine. The first wave of only the Marsh Hoppers is the only time they pose any semblance of a threat in the second encounter. However, it's still the same as if it was on flat ground. The thing that makes the difference is how they're spawning from multiple directions, making it harder to round them all up like a herd. The gravity mechanic doesn't shine until the next wave with the two wearables. The constant turning caused by trying to get out of their way and them being able to run along the walls makes them difficult to keep track of compared to how it is on flat ground. Their pathfinding can also get a bit wonky on this, leading to unexpected behavior. This freshens up the typical Matador routine with them that we've grown accustomed to. The next wave with the Zorgs and Biomechanoids is still the same as if the gravity wasn't changed. Strafe and shoot. It's even easier since there's infinite room to strafe. And that's it. Only 3 waves, and of course it falls victim to the problem plaguing this game. There are not enough enemies. It is cool to see lasers coming in from in front, above, and the sides like it's now 3D. It's fun and refreshing to fight in this new perspective, but it is not used to its fullest extent because of the low density of enemies. Like I've mentioned, 2 of the waves function similarly to how they would if this was on flat ground. There's no need to worry about Mental's minions flanking you from above and the sides, entombing you with lasers. We barely get a taste of how rushing enemies would interact with this arena with only 2 wearables. You can kill both of them with the sniper rifle before they even have a chance to do anything. If you want to count the frogs, then sure, but they don't carry the same threat and necessity to keep track of as a clear or wearable. Plus, we have the chainsaw and flamethrower. Nor did we see both melee and ranged aliens at the same time to really see how the pressure feels. The whole thing ends as it's getting started. It's disappointing, since we don't see the gravity used this way again until Sirius Sam next encounter. The ramp in the Palenque demo does a better job with enemies trickling in, clear and eventually kamikazes running down, and Rocketeers always shooting projectiles with an occasional zumble, all of which helps keep the pressure on the player. Not to forget the projectiles coming in from in front and all the way up to the top of the ramp. It works because the player has to rely on early game weapons since everything else is either unattainable or has very limited ammo. The player is loaded by the time Newton's Nightmare comes along, and the waves don't match the intensity that the player carries. The gimmick that follows Newton's Nightmare is a nice one too. It shows off both multi-directional gravity and low gravity. This is mainly for fun to see Clear float in the air. The rigid sides of the floor help the Clear get closer by obscuring your line of sight, but it does cause them to miss their lunge with the low gravity. There's not much else about it besides the fact that we barely have any fights at all that utilize low gravity. It's only this one, and if you turn off the gravity using the pills back in the bounce house. One room afterwards, and we can finally see the outdoors again with the sun pyramid towering overhead. The fight here is decent with biomechanoids coming from all sides and later on werewolves and demons, although there's not much to discuss. It is pretty with the lasers in the night sky. I like the sunstone shining up above too, like the star that it is. The lighting overall for this part is great with fire, starlight, and the shading that all of those different sources cause around the arena. Crow Team does an excellent job with the lighting and coloring of the environments throughout the campaign. This is just one of the standouts to me. The fight music for this level also makes it feel dramatic since this is almost the end of the episode and it's right before the boss. To no surprise, Nitrixa says that the teleporter is guarded, in all caps too, so she must be serious this time. The interesting part is how Kukulkan isn't in cahoots with Mental, and if he was with the Sirians, then I would imagine that he would help Sam fight Mental's horde, but he doesn't. He is a neutral party, so is he truly neutral? No, he attacks on sight in both Classic and Revolution. He only targets Sam. Mental's forces are only affected by him when they're in the way. Interestingly, they can hurt Kukulkan, so it might be possible to defeat him without directly harming him. You just have to make sure that they don't kill each other before Kukulkan finally croaks. Plus, we have Sam saying this.
My flaming fists of fury will destroy you, fiend! Ha ha ha! God, who writes this stuff?
It's not like Sam came here on peaceful terms, but to be fair, Kukulkan shot first. If Kukulkan isn't truly neutral, how did the Sirians get him to defend the teleporter? Are there other mythological figures that are real? First, we need to answer who Kukulkan is. He is the feathered serpent god of the Mayans. He's also labeled as a creator god and the god of wind, hence his appearance. In classic ancient Egyptian fashion, there is another Mayan god of the wind called Huarcan, and of course the Aztec version of Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl, who gets his wind attribute from a fusion dance with another Aztec god called Ehecatl. They don't matter, yet it helps show that the Mesoamerican mythology is just as messy as the Egyptians, which ties into what I'm about to say. Why isn't Kukulkan's model a feathered serpent, and instead it's an air elemental as shown in the editor? In a very credible, peer-reviewed, and industry-standard source of information, they call Kukulkan a, quote, white alien god of Mesoamerica. Why white? Well, if we look at the Sirians in Sirius Sam 2, it should be obvious. One of them just got left in the car for too long as a kid. It also mentions how Teotihuacan may have been constructed with the help of these white alien gods. That's why this place is called City of the Gods. If we include the personal vision portal technology discussed earlier and the Book of Thoth magic from the first encounter, Kukulkan may not be who we think he is. Every other deity, along with some rulers, have been a Sirian, with the only exception possibly being Khnum because of the Legend of the Beast DLC. They're the only ones who can perform godlike feats and the only species that have met humanity before Mental's arrival when the time lock was activated. So far, this is all speculation. Let's back it up with things found within the game. Nitrixa's entry on Kukulkan labels his metabolism as inorganic. The only other entity with an inorganic metabolism are the lava golems. This makes sense because they are both elementals, but why is that so? If we look at the lava golem entry, we can see that they are made of magic. We first meet them guarding the entrance to Thebes, the other city of the Sirians. From then on, we only see them in Karnak, Mesoamerica, Babylon, in the lava caves in the Land of the Damned where the portal to the Holy Grail is, and finally, the Grand Cathedral where the backup spaceship is. Everywhere that has a Syrian presence, either through themselves or the Ark al-Magi, lava golems are nowhere to be seen in other games besides The Last Hope and as a secret in Sirius Sam 4. The Last Hope takes place in Egypt and other planets where the Syrians may have been to before. Since The Last Hope is the earliest game chronologically, the lava golems may have been wiped out afterwards by the time Sirius Sam 4 and 3 come around. The secret in 4 may have been the last lava golem. They are likely constructs created by the Syrians to protect themselves given how we first encounter them guarding their city after the revolt by Memphis rulers. We can see this with how the golems do not dissipate into dust like all of Mental's minions upon death. They just plop to the ground as a puddle. Learning from that experience, they created more in Mesoamerica as guardians. The Ark al-Magi have Syrian artifacts as evidenced by the Holy Grail and the teleporters. They more than likely have the technology to create lava golems in Babylon and Europe. As stated before, the Syrians would have needed technological assistance because of how they were new to using magic. It's not unreasonable that the Ark al-Magi were taught magic by the Syrians, as that would be helpful in fighting against Mental or for protecting their artifacts. The magic may only be imbuement at this point, such as Montezuma's masks and the blue pigments discussed earlier. The more powerful magic, such as teleportation without a device, like what we see at the start of Sirius Sam 2, may only be performed by the highly experienced wizards. They needed the concentration of 3 of them to do it too, hence why we have things like the Syrian bracelet in Sirius Sam 3 as technological assistance to perform higher feats of magic. In Jewish folklore fashion, the golems eventually misconstrued their original goal and ended up fighting for Mental, or Mental simply took control over them with superior magic. Nitrixa does state that the lava golems are the base for all other elementals. It is possible that Kukulkan is another Syrian construct to protect the first teleporter, similar to how the lava golem boss protects Thebes. There's still one more thing unexplained about Kukulkan. He's also listed as an ancient deity and stated to be immortal within Nitrixa's entry. We know that Syrians can change their appearance with magic and appear as gods from the Book of Thoth excerpt and the artworks depicting them. We know that Syrians use technology to amplify their magic. We know that they can create elementals with magic. We know that the Syrians are prone to madness from their original backstory. And we also have the very credible quote from earlier calling Kukulkan a white alien god, along with the multidimensional archaeologist discovering the personal vision portal technology from the Mayan calendar. Putting all of that together, who fits this description? That's right, those big-head Syrians. One of them was mental enough to imbue himself with magic using a personal vision portal in a quest to become an actual god and turned into this monstrosity. They're putting magic in the water to turn people into freaking elementals! I'm sick of this crap! Nitrixa, up the antipsychotics dosage.
Administering medical attention. Danger. Insufficient medical supplies to repair damage.
Ah, crap! I was afraid you were gonna say that.
Despite it possibly being against one of our allies, the fight is fun. Who cares who you're fighting against when you're flying in the air, blasting tons of enemies, and have a killer soundtrack playing? It's an instrumental version of a track called Freedom Is Mine by Undercode. Crow Team's composer and sound designer, Damian Ravunats, is friends with the band's lead guitarist and songwriter, Ivan Spilyokiec, and that's basically how Undercode's music made it into Sirius Sam. They'll provide the boss songs for this game. Kukulkan grows in size as well as the tornadoes that he summons as more of his health is taken away. More dangerous enemies spawn while his health bar dwindles too, while each new wave piles on top of each other. You could go the route of clearing out as many of them before each stage to make it less overwhelming, but it is slower and you'll end up fighting more enemies since all of the spawners deactivate when the boss is defeated. The serious speed in the arena will be your lifeline for avoiding damage. This does mark one of the few times where the power-ups don't trivialize a fight, so credit to Crow Team for accomplishing that. The twisters can be handy too for getting out of the way if the speed boost is about to run out. Kukulkan itself isn't very interesting as a boss, and the real fun comes from the chaos of Mental's minions, serious speed power-ups, and everything getting thrown into the air by tornadoes. He's more like an objective to complete by getting his health to 0 while Mental tries to get in the way of that. Part of why I find this fun is because the game is finally letting loose with what the Sirius engine can do. A fight like this is uniquely Sirius Sam. You won't find it anywhere else. The wind interacts with everything within its path. Enemies will fly into the sky, and any projectiles can be thrown off course, like seeing rockets and lasers curving around with the current. It doesn't matter how big or fast they are, they're getting carried by the tornadoes. Hit scan bullets obviously aren't affected, but you don't want to use them here except against the Horde. Kukulkan has complete damage resistance to bullets, shells, melee, and the sniper rifle, but not the flamethrower for whatever reason. He also has some resistance to cannonballs, nullifying 40% of its damage. It brings its fully charged max damage shot of 750 down to 450, or a little bit above not charging the cannon at all. Nitrixa does hint to use the rocket launcher and explicitly says not to use bullets against him. That's nice of her to warn us, however, she's not reliable in terms of this stuff. I don't want to get into this yet, just know that some regular enemies also have damage resistances that aren't mentioned, or sometimes she lies like saying how the Reptiloid demon's projectiles are indestructible. She's really trying to screw with our heads. Overall, I like this fight. It's a better boss format of having game mechanics interact in a new way rather than having to solve a puzzle to win. It's that chaotic sandbox aspect that not a lot of first-person shooter boss fights have. Usually they're too structured in how you're supposed to win, like Ugzan III, for example. After Kukulkan's defeat and cleaning up any leftover aliens, the teleporter activates. Now the fool seeks to return to the past and undo the future that is mental.